The day my son was born was supposed to be the happiest of my life. I remember holding him in my arms, staring at his tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and feeling an overwhelming sense of love. My wife, Emily, looked exhausted but radiant, smiling at me like we had just accomplished something incredible together. At that moment, I never would have imagined that the child I was holding wasn't mine. For the first few years, everything seemed perfect. I worked hard to provide for my family while Emily stayed home, raising our son. I adored them both, and I genuinely believed Emily loved me just as much in return. But looking back now, I realized that the red flags had been there all along. I just didn't want to see them. It started with little things. Emily was always protective of our son, which I initially thought was just normal maternal instinct. But as he grew older, she became almost obsessive about controlling everything related to him, his diet, his activities, even how much time he spent alone with me. If I ever brought up how different he looked compared to me, she'd brush it off with a laugh and say, "Not every kid looks exactly like their father." At first, I agreed. After all, genetics can be unpredictable. But as the years passed, it became harder to ignore the differences. He didn't share any of my features. His hair was a different shade, his eyes had a shape that I couldn't place in my family's lineage, and even his mannerisms didn't match mine or any of my relatives. People would joke about it, friends, co-workers, even my own mother. "He doesn't really look like you," they'd say with a chuckle. I always laughed along, but deep down their words stuck with me. Then Emily started acting distant. She would spend hours on her phone, smiling at messages she never let me see. If I walked into the room, she'd lock her screen or flip it over. When I asked who she was talking to, she'd roll her eyes and say, "Just a friend." Sometimes, I'd catch her sneaking out of the house late at night, claiming she was just going for a drive to clear her mind. I wanted to believe her. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband who accused his wife of things without proof. But doubt started creeping into my mind, poisoning the trust one had in her. One night, when she thought I was asleep, I heard her whispering on the phone. Her voice was soft, intimate, like the way she used to talk to me when we first fell in love. My heart pounded in my chest as I listened. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone said everything. That was the night I realized something was very, very wrong. Doubt gnawed at me like a slow-moving poison. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself that I was overthinking, that I was letting paranoia get the best of me. But the whispers in the night, the way she guarded her phone, the lingering scent of cologne on her clothes that wasn't mine, each little thing added another crack to the foundation of our marriage. One evening, I casually brought up the idea of getting a DNA test. I played it off as a joke, laughing as I told Emily, "Wouldn't it be funny to see which of our family's genes are stronger?" But the moment the words left my mouth, I saw something shift in her expression. Her smile froze, her grip on her coffee mug tightened, and for a split second, there was sheer panic in her eyes before she quickly masked it with annoyance. "That's ridiculous," she said, setting her mug down with a little too much force. "Why would you even suggest something like that?" I shrugged, pretending not to notice her reaction. "Just curious, that's all." "Well, I think it's insulting," she snapped. "What? Do you not trust me? Do you actually believe I would?" She stopped herself and took a deep breath, shaking her head. "I can't believe you'd even ask me that. If you really love our son, you wouldn't question something so hurtful." Her words stung, but they didn't erase the doubt. If anything, her defensiveness only made it worse. A part of me wanted to let it go, to believe her, to continue living in the bubble I had created for myself. But another part of me, the part that had been keeping track of every suspicious moment, knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. A few nights later, while Emily was in the shower, I saw her phone left unattended on the nightstand. It was an opportunity one had never taken before, but this time, I couldn't stop myself. My hands trembled as I picked it up and unlocked it, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. And that's when I found the messages. Hundreds of them. Between her and a man I didn't recognize. The texts weren't vague or innocent. They were intimate, filled with inside jokes, pet names, and worst of all, messages about my son. Asterisk, he looks more like you every day. Asterisk. Asterisk, I wish we didn't have to hide this. Asterisk. Asterisk, do you think he'll ever find out? Asterisk. My stomach dropped. My hands clenched the phone so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The weight of her betrayal hit me like a truck, leaving me breathless. My world, my marriage, my entire sense of reality, shattered in an instant. I set the phone down just as I heard the shower turn off. My mind raced. Confront her now? Wait. Act like nothing was wrong? No. I needed proof. Real proof. And I knew exactly how to get it. The next morning, while Emily was distracted with breakfast, I took a strand of my son's hair and sent it in for a DNA test. I told myself I was just being thorough, but deep down, I already knew what the results would say. I just wasn't prepared for how much it would destroy me when they finally arrived. The results arrived in my inbox 2 weeks later. I had been dreading this moment, yet I couldn't stop my fingers from trembling as I opened the email. My heart pounded as my eyes scanned the words on the screen. Probability of paternity, 0%. 0. I read it again. And again. But the words didn't change. I wasn't his father. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I thought I might be sick. Everything inside me felt like it was caving in, like the walls of my life were collapsing all at once. The memories of holding him for the first time, of late-night feedings, of teaching him how to ride a bike. All of it felt like a cruel joke. My love for him was real, but the foundation of that love had been built on a lie. Emily had deceived me for years. She had watched me love a child that wasn't mine, let me believe I was his father, and never once told me the truth. I clenched my fists, my body trembling with rage and devastation. This wasn't just an affair. This was something deeper, something more calculated. She had stolen years of my life, made me raise another man's child without my consent. I needed answers. That evening, I sat across from Emily at the dinner table, forcing myself to stay calm. Our son was in the other room, watching cartoons, blissfully unaware of the storm about to break. I slid my phone across the table, the DNA results open for her to see. She glanced at the screen, and for the first few seconds, she didn't react. But then her face drained of color. Her hands shook as she put her fork down. What is this?" she stammered, though she already knew. "You tell me," I said, my voice low and steady, though my entire body was screaming with anger. "Because it says I'm not his father." Emily's lips parted, but no words came out. Her eyes darted around the room as if looking for an escape. "Who is he, Emily?" I pressed, my patience running out. "Who's his real father?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I had no sympathy left. She had taken everything from me. The trust, the love, the belief that we were a family. I can explain," she whispered. "No. No more lies." My voice hardened. "Just tell me the truth." She let out a shaky breath, wiping her tears, as if playing the victim. And then, finally, she said the words that confirmed my worst fears. "It's Ryan." I froze. Ryan. An old coworker of hers. A name I had never thought twice about until now. "How long?" I asked through gritted teeth. Tears streamed down her face. "Before we got married and after." The room spun. My mind reeled with the weight of her words. So, it wasn't just a one-time mistake. It was years of deception, of calculated lies. I pushed back my chair and stood. "You disgust me." She reached for me, but I recoiled. "Please don't do this. You're his father in every way that matters." "No." I cut her off. "I was the fool who raised another man's son while you laughed behind my back." She sobbed, begging for another chance, but I was done. The betrayal was too deep, too cruel. There was no fixing this. I turned my back on her and walked away, already planning my next move. Because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I spent the next few days in a fog of anger and heartbreak, but beneath all of that, a cold determination settled in. I wasn't going to let Emily manipulate me any further. She had stolen years of my life, and now it was time for me to take back control. The first thing I did was call a lawyer. I wanted to know my options, what rights I had, what steps I could take. Since I wasn't the biological father, I had no legal obligation to stay in my son's life. The realization shattered me. I loved that boy more than anything, but the truth was undeniable. He wasn't mine. Emily kept begging me to talk, to give her a chance to explain, but what was left to say? I told her I was filing for divorce, and that's when the real Emily emerged. She went from sobbing and apologizing to furious and cruel in an instant. "You can't just walk away from him," she snapped. "You've raised him for 6 years. You're his father, no matter what some stupid DNA test says." I scoffed, shaking my head. "Now you care about what's right? Where was that concern when you were lying to me for years?" She crossed her arms, her face hardening. "You'll regret this. He loves you. You love him. How can you just abandon him like this?" And that was the worst part. I did love him. He was innocent in all of this. But I couldn't stay in a marriage built on deceit, and I couldn't keep living this lie. "I'll figure out what's best for him," I said. "But I'm done with you." The divorce process was brutal. Emily fought me every step of the way, not because she loved me, but because she didn't want to lose the life she had built on lies. She tried to guilt me into staying, even threatened to go after me for child support. But legally, she had no case. I wasn't his father, and I had the DNA test to prove it. The hardest part was saying goodbye to my son. He didn't understand what was happening, why his world was suddenly falling apart. And I couldn't bring myself to tell him the full truth. Instead, I told him that I loved him, that I always would, but that sometimes adults had to make hard choices. I walked away from that house with nothing but a packed bag and a shattered heart. Months passed. I started therapy, worked through the pain, and slowly rebuilt my life. Emily tried to contact me a few times, but I ignored her. She had made her choices. Now she had to live with them. And as for my son, I still checked in from a distance. I made sure he was okay. Maybe one day, when he's older, I'll tell him the truth. But for now, I had to heal. Emily had taken so much from me, but she wouldn't take my future. I refused to let her betrayal define me. And so I moved forward, one step at a time, away from the lies, away from the pain, towards a life where I finally put myself first.